Hello students, this course is called English for Written Communication. As you all know, it covers 10 topics. And by the end of this module, all of you should be able to, the first one is to write different types of essays with a certain degree of confidence. Okay, the next one, all of you will have to come up with a good research proposal. And last but not least, all of you should be able to write a properly structured and organized research paper. Now let me go to the first topic, which is called Introduction to Communication. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that all topics should have their own learning objectives. Now the first one, by the end of this topic, all of you should be able to explain what is meant by the word communication in general. The next one, all of you should be able to identify the main elements in the communication process. Thirdly, you should be able to differentiate between oral and written communication. Next, highlight some basic tips on writing. And last but not least, list out common pitfalls to avoid in written communication. Okay guys, before we go to the more complex, what is communication? Well, basically, according to the module, all right, and definitely you can go to any website, communication is a skill to be learned. Okay? Now, I believe that all of us are born with physical ability to talk. But remember, students, not every one of us can communicate well unless we make special efforts to develop and refine this skill further. Yes, we can communicate, but remember, communication is a two-way process. Okay? And not all the messages transferred to you can be understood by the receiver. So remember that communication is a two-way process, and it is a skill to be learned and to be practiced daily to make it more effectively. Now, students, very often we take things easily, especially in communication. We think that people understand or understood what we're trying to say, but actually some of them, or most of us, have this called miscommunication. Okay? And sometimes we forget how complex this communication process actually is. So, what is communication? All right? So, communication, when you talk about communication, definitely it has its own process. Okay? When we have communication process, definitely we have the elements to make the process successful. Therefore, what are the main elements in the communication process? Now, let's look at this model. Okay? Now, let's go to this model. Now, this is the sender. Okay? That means the sender means the person who is speaking, the speaker. Okay? When the speaker speaks, all right, the speaker will send message to the receiver. The receiver is also called the listener. All right? So, when the listener or the receiver receives a message, then the listener will have to understand and interpret the message. Okay? So, when the listener is successful in the understanding and interpreting of the message, thus, he or she will give feedback to the speaker. To somehow or rather indirectly telling the speaker that he or she understands what the speaker is trying to say. Then the speaker or the sender will understand and interpret the feedback given by the receiver or the listener. Therefore, you can see it's a two-way process. It's not only one way, it's a two-way process of communication. Communication also has its own effects. So what are the factors affecting communication? Now the first one is status or role. It depends on the speaker speaking to who. Who is the listener? Might be the boss speaking to the subordinates, might be friends to friends, or perhaps mother to the son. So status and role does affect the communication. Besides that, cultural differences. Perhaps a Malaysian talking to a foreigner, okay, perhaps a foreigner speaking to other foreign residents. Next, the choice of communication channels. The speaker decides to choose what kind of channels to communicate with the receiver is also another factor that affects the communication. Next is the length of communication. You choose whether you want to speak a longer period or a shorter period. If a mother speaks to the son in a certain of a certain subject, so it depends, because you must remember the child's situation as well, whether he or she is ready to listen in a longer period or in a shorter period. So length of communication is definitely affecting communication. Next is the use of language. What kind of language do you want to use? Formal language, informal language, okay, and the choice of words that you use, and also the pronunciation is also important. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these abilities is also affecting communication, whereby we have impaired sight, dyslexia, and also poor mental health, yeah? So these factors can be barriers to good communication. Therefore, certain precautions has to be taken to alleviate problems caused by these disabilities. Next is known and unknown receiver. You might make phone calls, or you might talk to someone that you do not know, or you know. So these two factors, whether you know the person or you do not know the person, can also affect the communication as well. Next, the individual perceptions, attitudes, and also personalities. Sometimes, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you have to take into consideration the receiver's personality, the receiver's attitude, and also the receiver's age and preferred style. You cannot communicate the same way as how you communicate to your father and how you communicate to your friends. For example, you meet your friend, you say, "Hey, what's up?" You cannot say, "Hey, what's up?" to your father. You cannot say, "Hey, what's up?" to your lecturer, right? So you must basically, before you are prepared to communicate with the receiver, you must really take note of their attitudes and their perception and also their personalities. Remember that. The next one is the atmosphere, the noise, and also the distraction. Sometimes you are at the party where it has lots of noise, lots of loud music. Therefore, you must put more effort, yeah, to speak to the receiver. So it does affect communication as well. Next, clarity of message. When you deliver a certain message to the receiver or to the listener, so you must make sure, is the message conveyed in ambiguous manner, or is the message delivered clear enough for the listener to listen or to understand or to interpret? So this factor is considered to be effective communication as well. Okay, students, so last but not least, the most important factor that affects communication is lack of feedback. Come on, students, why are you all keeping silent? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Or is it that you're keeping silent meaning to say that you understand? So that is the most important factor, is because feedback is important as it enables confirmation of understanding to be made by both parties. Keeping silent, it doesn't mean that you understand what the speaker is trying to say. Am I right? So, ladies and gentlemen, in order to understand what the speaker is trying to say, you must at least give a little bit of feedback to the speaker so that the speaker knows that you actually understand what the speaker is trying to say. So the lack of feedback, okay, can sometimes at least create problems as it can lead to uncertainty and confusions. So remember, students, you must always ask questions to your lecturers to any questions or to any situations that you do not understand, because keeping silent will somehow or other give impact to the lecturer, meaning to say that you understand what he or she says. Okay?